So how do you plan that first Camino? Maybe you've heard about the Camino, you're itching to give it a go, but you're really not sure how to go about the planning process. Where do you start? Someone recently asked that very question on the channel, so let's answer it this week. So you're all excited, you really feel that you want to go and walk this first Camino, but you're not really sure where to start. So let me go through a very simple planning process for you. And what I'll do at the end of this video, I'll kind of repeat the process quickly, so it's not too long a video, and I'll tell you how I'm planning my next one. But particularly planning your first Camino, which is a little bit different because you haven't done it before. How do you go about the planning? So let me run you through what I would suggest as the logical steps and questions. Those who've walked many Caminos before can also, by all means comment down below, throw in your suggestions. And if you're planning your first Camino and you have more questions, do comment down below because I love to see lots of questions and help you with your planning process. So let's go through some of the things I'd suggest you might want to consider. One question might be, why are you walking the Camino? And you'll find so I'll reference some things on the channel. You'll find a video on the channel. Just use the search feature about why are you walking your Camino. So in terms of planning, why is that important? Because do you want to have a lot of solitude and alone time? Or do you like the social element maybe? So a lot of people love that sense of community on the Camino on some of the busier routes, for example, routes, whatever part of the world you're in. And they love to get together with lots of other pilgrims. They love the albergues, the hostels, which are full of pilgrims. So think about that for a moment. Do you want that social community sense? Or do you really almost want to be sort of walking alone and not seeing many people? So the reason I asked that question is because, and I'm going to hold up my favourite guidebooks. No, I don't get commissions from Mr. Brearley, but I love his guidebooks. This is in the back of his guidebooks, and it shows all the different Camino routes through France and Spain. Depending on why you're walking, will kind of point you towards different routes. So if you love the social element, look at some of the more popular routes, the Camino Frances, Camino Portuguese, to a degree perhaps the Norte. If you want more sort of isolation, like I'm going to be seeking on my next one, I'm going to try the Via de la Plata, and then there are very isolated routes as well. So think about that for a moment, and that'll help you start thinking about which route you might want to walk. A lot of people pick the Camino Frances or the Camino Portuguese as their first Camino. Notice I say as their first Camino. If you think you're going to get away with one, think again. Many people are drawn to go back time and time again. Some people do walk a remote one as their first ones. So anyway, that's first question. Do you want lots of community around you? Do you really want to be alone? What time of year are you going to walk? That will also help you decide which route you might walk. So again, the more popular ones like the Camino Frances, for example, if you're going to walk in winter, there's more likelihood of facilities being open. You naturally need to be very careful and check which albergues are actually open. There's a few, and people do walk in winter. On some of the more remote routes, that might be a bit more difficult. So think about that, the time of year as well, and climate and stuff like that. Obviously, if you were walking down in southern Spain in winter, the climate's going to be a little bit milder than in northern Spain, where it's, on the mountains there'll be thick snow and so on. So that's another thing to consider. Next one, which is really important, is do you actually want a Compostela? What is the Compostela? It's the certificate that you get from the Pilgrim's Office issued by the cathedral in Santiago to basically confirm that you have indeed met the requirements of walking the Camino, which are you must have walked at least 100 kilometres contiguously into Santiago, so finishing in Santiago, 100 kilometres on foot or 200 on a bicycle or horse. I think those are the figures. Definitely by foot is 100. So that's why walking from Sarria is very popular, because it's just over 100 k's from Santiago. So if you want to Compostela, you need to obviously finish in Santiago, and you must walk at least 100 kilometres or 200 on a bike or a horse, whatever that might be. I think those figures are right for bikes and horses. Someone corrected me recently on the channel. A horse is 100 or 200? Not sure. But it's definitely 100 for walking on by foot. So if you want the Compostela, that has to factor into your thinking. Next question, how long are you going to walk for? How much time have you got? And that's kind of a double barrel question, because like, how many days have you got, and how far do you expect to walk each day? So if you understand that, let's keep the numbers simple. I've got 10 days to walk, and I'm quite comfortable walking 20 miles a day. Don't know, let me work in kilometres. I'm comfortable to walk 25 kilometres a day, and I've got 10 days. Simplistically, I can start 250 kilometres from Santiago. You know, you can draw a line and say, well, I could start on the Frances here, the Portuguese here, you know, whatever that, Sanabras here, and that starts to point you towards where you might consider starting. You've then got to consider, how do I get to my start point? So I have started twice in Saint-Jean, for example. Both times I was flying in from overseas, from Australia, and I went to Paris and then got a train down to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and then walked to Santiago. So we've done that twice. And then Pat and I have also, our port of entry was Madrid. So we thought, let's go and see Madrid. And we got a train from Madrid up to Leon and Astorga to start another one. So work back from Santiago. How long are you going to walk for? That's sort of roughly where I want to be starting, and then how am I going to get to that start point? Obviously, depending where you are in the world, that could be simple or not so simple. Next question would be, do you want to be booking accommodation or not? So why is that relevant? Well, it's relevant because there are different accommodation types and different accommodation numbers on the different routes. So for example, on the Camino Frances, there's lots and lots of places to stay. On some of the more remote Caminos, there's probably not so many. And so your ability maybe to plan ahead and book ahead is not quite as good. So also it helps you understand kind of what mode or rhythm you're going to have in your Camino. Are you going to try and book the whole thing up front, which I would never encourage? I'm not sure how it works for people, because I couldn't possibly plan, let's say, a 20-day Camino and expect to keep to that schedule. There are too many variables. You know, my level of fitness, if I get injured, you know, so the most I ever do is sort of plan 2 or 3 days out. But think about that. Do you want the comfort of knowing where you're going to be sleeping that night or the next night? So that can impact, you know, which Camino you're going to walk, your mode of actually walking the Camino. And then the next question, a controversial one perhaps, is, are you going to carry all your gear or not? By that I mean, are you going to carry a backpack with all your stuff in it from start to finish? Or are you going to have luggage transported from point to point? What's the impact of that? I would always urge people to carry their gear in a backpack if they can. Why is that? Because really just one word, flexibility. It gives you the ultimate flexibility in where you want to stay. So, you know, for example, you could be coming through a village one day and you think, oh, wow, this is just so charming and I love the landscape, and oh, look at this place that we could stay, or this place we could eat. Well, let's stay here. You know, having that sort of freedom is great. But if you're booking ahead and if you're transporting luggage ahead, you don't have that freedom, because you have to go to that village. That's where not only your bed is booked, but that's where your bag is waiting for you. So think about those sort of things, the style of Camino that you want to be walking. So that's the bag. Next question would be your budget. What's your budget going to be? This isn't necessarily going to determine which route you're going to walk, which route, but it will have an impact maybe on how far you're going to walk, what style of accommodation particularly you're going to be using. So think about your budget. I do have a couple of videos on budgets on the channel, so if I can remember I'll put the links down below, but use the search feature and you'll find those. I tend to be, let me be totally honest here, I'm probably sort of middle to upper budget in terms of Camino pilgrims. You know, you can get away on a very low budget staying in Donativo and municipal albergues and things like that. I'm not really into communal sleeping arrangements, so I tend to stay in private rooms. As if you've been on the channel for a while, you'll know that. So I stay in very modest private rooms, you know, sort of 20 to 30 euros a night. Occasionally I do splash out on a really nice place, you know, the odd, what do they call them? Got a mental block. Is that an age thing? Parador. I've stayed in a couple of Paradors. If there's something really special, like some historic building or something like that, you know, then I might splash out for that. But otherwise it's generally just, you know, a private room. And private rooms in albergues I use quite a lot. So think about your budget and what type of Camino is that going to allow you to do. And then finally, you might say this is the most important, but having gone through all of those questions, worked out how far you're going to walk, which one you're going to walk, your style of accommodation, finally then start planning your gear. And I've got lots of videos on the gear. Maybe have a look for what's in my pack. That's a very comprehensive one where I go through all of the gear. The gear, it's very easy to spend a lot of money on Camino gear, and I have to confess I probably spent way too much when I first started. I haven't added to my gear much at all, probably in the last 5 years. Basic gear doesn't have to be expensive, just got to be functional. You know, if you're on a budget, you can pick up secondhand stuff. You know, you do see a few Gucci pilgrims with the latest, you know, Gore-Tex gear and fancy stuff, you know, that's fine. You also see plenty of pilgrims just walking in everyday stuff. So as long as it's functional, it's going to keep you warm, dry, whatever, you know, whatever you need at the time of year that you're walking, that's fine. Good footwear is the most important. Doesn't have to be flashy or new, might be something you already have. Some sort of rain protection is generally required, and a comfortable backpack. You know, you don't have to go mad on equipment. So there's equipment tips on the channel as well. So let's just recap on those questions. And if you've walked a few Caminos yourself, you know, do jump in if I've missed something. But I think if you're going to plan your first Camino, the things to think about are what time of year you're going to walk. Do you actually want a Compostela or not? Because that's going to mean you have to finish in Santiago and you have to walk at least 100 Ks. How long do you want to be walking for in terms of days or kilometers? What's your start point likely to be? How are you going to get to the start point? What sort of style of Camino do you want to be walking? Is it going to be, you know, freestyle, where you'll just rock up in a village and sort of say, yeah, I'll stay here? Or is it going to be more of one that you want to book accommodation ahead? So in terms of planning, you need to think about how will I do that booking? Is it going to be done on booking.com? Am I confident to phone up? Am I going to be emailing? Those sorts of things. Just think that through. Am I going to carry my backpack with all my stuff in it, or am I going to ship luggage ahead? That's going to limit you to which Caminos you can walk. The more populous ones have those sort of facilities, the remote ones generally don't. What sort of budget am I going to have? Because that's going to, the biggest impact that will have is on the type of accommodation you have, and then the next second impact will be on the sort of level of catering that you're going to have. I have to say I'm a bit of a foodie when I get on Camino. And then finally plan your gear and don't go nuts on it. Final thing, book your travel and get out there and walk and have a wonderful and amazing time. So for those who are asking how do I go about planning my Camino, that's a little bit of a hit list. I hope that was helpful. If you have any other questions, do comment down below and I'll be more than pleased to answer them, and other people on the channel help out answering as well, which is great. Thank you for watching. See you next week.